Hello my amazing people, and welcome back to my channel. If you're back, if you are new, welcome to my channel. I'm Shayna and I have another true crime case for you today. Just my usual disclaimer, this is all information that I have found online that I've compiled into a video for educational and entertainment purposes. As you may or may not be able to hear in my voice, I am recovering from a lot that's going on with my health right now. So I put off making a video for the last 2 weeks, and I feel like I am at a place now where I am ready to record, and I also just simply did not want to wait any longer to bring this story to you. Today I'm going to be telling you about the case of Kendrick Johnson and about his untimely death and everything that has happened since then. And this story really is near and dear to me, and it very well may be to you. Many people may remember this case because it happened in 2013. So his story I say this all the time, but his story really does deserve to be told. And his case actually was reopened about 3 months ago. So we may see some new developments hopefully in the next 6 months. And I'm looking forward to justice being served for Kendrick. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining me this evening, and let's get started. Kendrick KJ Johnson was born on October 10th, 1995 to Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson. At the time of this case, he was 17 years old and attended Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia. He was a quiet young man who really got along with everyone. He was really polite and kind, and his parents described Kendrick to be a jokester and really just the life of the family home. His father said that Kendrick was the kind of son that every parent would love to have. He really stayed out of trouble and was a great brother to his siblings. Kendrick played 3 sports in high school and had dreams of one day becoming a professional football player. That was his sport, even though he did 3. I know he did football, basketball, and one other one. His main sport was football, and he was really good at it, and he really wanted to be a professional athlete one day. On January 10th of 2013, Kendrick didn't make any of his classes after 1 p.m. that day, and he actually was planning to attend a sporting event after school and told his mom that he would call her when he was ready to be picked up from this event. But after the school day had ended and the normal time frame for this event to take place had passed, his mom, Jacqueline, was wondering what was going on. She hadn't received a call from him, and she decided to just go up to the school herself by the time his 11:30 curfew had came and went. When she got up to the school, there was no sign of Kendrick or any other students for that matter, so she took it upon herself to call the police and report Kendrick missing. Of course, when she initially called, she did receive pushback, which this is my biggest pet peeve, is when moms and dads call to report their children missing and the police try to talk them out of it or tell them that they might be with friends or they might be with a girlfriend or whatever. That's exactly what they did to Jacqueline. And she insisted to them that she knew her son better than anyone else and that he would not come home without at least telling his family what was going on. And at this point, basically, she convinced the police to accept the missing persons report, and it was filed. Now, Kendrick's mother actually worked for the school that he went to, so she was often at the school anyway. She was his transportation to the school every day, and the morning after she reported Kendrick to be missing, she did go up to the school early just to look around for herself, maybe talk to some people, see if there was any information that she could get to help her figure out where her son was. And unfortunately, around the same exact time that morning, the very next day after Kendrick went missing, in the gym there were students who were crawling on top of the big wrestling mats that are usually inside of high school gyms. And when they were crawling on top of these mats, they looked down inside of one of them and saw what looked like feet. They were socks that were pointing upwards inside of the mat. So when looking down into the mat, these 2 students could see that someone's feet were facing upwards, but they couldn't see who it was or their face, and they didn't know if this person was okay or not. So they called over their gym teacher, who the gym teacher obviously sees what they see, and he can tell that this person is not responsive. They're not responding to him calling out for them to see if they are still alive. So he has to maneuver all of these mats. There's several gym mats that are kind of lined up and bunched together against a corner in the gym. And he drags a couple of them out. He pulls a couple of them down from vertical position to horizontal position, and he finally gets to the one where this person is inside of. And when he lays this mat down, he says that he smelled a smell basically that would only come from a corpse, a rotten smell. And it wasn't that horrible yet, but he could tell that this person was most likely deceased based on the smell. And when he laid the mat into a horizontal position, the body of the person inside of the mat did slide out partially, and he could tell that this person was injured. Not only that, there was also a pool of blood under where the mat had been standing up. One student helped the gym teacher to maneuver the mat into this horizontal position, and they began unrolling it to hopefully help this person who was inside. As they are unrolling it, it is a very gruesome sight to see. Students start running out of the gym, and several of them call the police to report that somebody was really, really hurt and probably dead inside of the school. To give you a brief idea of what this gym was like and what it was used for, like many high schools, there was an old gym and a new gym inside of this school, and these mats were located inside of the old gym. They would often be used for sports or for gym class and things like that, and they were often kept off to one side. Inside of these gym mats, students would often keep their belongings inside of the mat. So they would put their things behind the mats or kind of stuff them inside of the mats so that they didn't have to pay for the lockers at this high school. For some reason at this high school, having a locker was not free. So students would use the mats in the old gym to store their belongings. Not only this, the old gym also was kind of in a central part of the school, at least a part of the school where it was convenient to use to walk through to get from class to class. So this was a frequently traveled area of the school. Students were always in there to get from one place to another or to get their belongings or for gym class. It was a very active part of the building. Around 10:30 a.m. that morning, police arrive at the high school to begin investigating what happened to this person inside of the mat, and it was eventually identified to be the body of Kendrick Johnson. However, police had a really hard time identifying Kendrick's body because of the state of his face, and they were able to infer that this was him because he had really long, beautiful locks in his hair, but his face was so badly battered. And I'm the type of person who does a lot of research on true crime. I'm afraid of everything, but for some reason when it comes to murders and things of that nature, death, it doesn't scare me as much. And I've seen a lot of post-mortem photos of people who are deceased. However, this is one of the worst photos that I've seen from an autopsy, and it made me shudder a little bit when I saw it. It scared me. I remember I was young. I was in high school when this case came out, and I saw the photo back then. So you can imagine how that may have scared me back then. And even as an adult, when I was starting to do the research for this case, I remember I was like, okay, you got to mentally prepare to see this. I do not recommend that you go and look for this photo. And I also would like to say that if you do research on this case on your own, please be very careful, because unfortunately, I don't like this. I don't like when photos of the deceased are plastered on the internet, but that's exactly how it is for Kendrick Johnson. The photos of him when he was alive and vibrant and well are all over the place as well. But his photograph of his body after he passed away is as well, and it's pretty hard to do any research without this photo popping up. Even in the regular articles, there's no warning on a lot of them. In the photo, it's a very close-up, zoomed-in picture of his face, and the closest photo that it reminds me of, or at least makes me feel the same way as when I look at it, is the picture of Emmett Till. If you've ever seen that photo, you know how graphic it is. It's exactly how I compare the Kendrick Johnson photo to be almost as graphic as the photo of Emmett Till, if not as graphic. So I wanted to make sure I put that out there because a lot of people will include it in their YouTube videos too, and it's too much for a lot of people. And I've seen it so many times now because I've been doing so much research on this case, but it is a lot and it's not easy to look at. So it's very important. I'm not going to show it in this video. I do want to let you know that. Just a heads up, be very careful in doing your research for this case. But I say all of that to say that his face was so severely swollen and disfigured that he didn't even look enough like himself to be identified by police. They figured that it was him from his hair, but they couldn't affirmatively say that this was Kendrick Johnson just by visually looking at his face because of how severely swollen it was. The autopsy results came back relatively quickly for Kendrick Johnson, and the medical examiner determined that he actually died from positional asphyxia, which is a fancy way of saying that his own body weight suffocated him. So the way that he was in the gym mat, upside down with his feet up and his head down, the weight of his body just suffocated him, is basically what the findings of this autopsy were. And around the same time, police were concluding that his death was an accident. They pretty much put together this entire story where the idea was Kendrick crawled on top of the mats to get his belongings from inside of the mat. He crawled on top and he realizes that his stuff is at the bottom, so he reaches into the mat and he tries to kind of shimmy his body into the mat, and then he gets stuck. No one can hear him calling for help, and then he is there for an extended period of time and he passes away. Police are pretty much nearly from the very beginning saying that this is a complete accident. As you might imagine, Kendrick's parents were not with this at all. There were a lot of factors that go into why Kendrick's family was so adamant about the fact that his death had to involve foul play, and I will go through each of them for you. There's a lot to unpack in this case, so put on your seatbelts because there's a lot of information that we're about to go through, but all of it is very important. There's a lot of things that will make you scratch your head involving the death of Kendrick Johnson. The first thing I want to talk about is the actual diameter of the opening of the gym mat. So the opening of the gym mat was 14 inches, and Kendrick's shoulders from one side to the other were 19 inches. So investigators basically said that he scrunched his shoulders in, he kind of shimmied his way so that he could fit into this opening. But it does seem unlikely. It does seem unlikely, and his dad, Kenneth, actually did a test himself. Now, he does seem to be a little larger in frame than Kendrick was, but he did the test of basically trying to fit himself into the mat to prove a point where it's like even a small person probably couldn't fit in here. He laid a mat down, tried to stick his body into it, and he couldn't get past his shoulders. He literally was just able to fit his head in. So that is the first thing that has a lot of people scratching their head is, why would he try to fit himself into an upside down mat that was way too small for his body? And how could he physically do that? That's number one. Kendrick's face, as I mentioned before, was extremely swollen. And the medical examiner and others believe that this is just because of the fact that his body was upside down and all the blood rushed to his head, and it just caused a swelling in his face, and that's why he was disfigured to the point that he was. However, when you look at the photo, I will say it looks like the face of someone who endured trauma, physical trauma. Like, it doesn't look like the face of somebody who was just upside down for a long time. It does look to be something so severe that it's hard for me to believe that was caused just by being upside down. When I tell you that you could not recognize him, you could not recognize him from the photos. He did not look like himself. It looked like he was severely beaten in the face. So that is number two. A lot of these, there seems to be a police and first medical examiner standpoint, and a lot of them there's a family, general public, and second medical examiner's opinion of it. So I will leave that out there. This is, as you may know, an unsolved case, but I'm just showing you the discrepancies. Let's keep going. Number three, under the mat where his body was, there was a pool of blood found. On top of the pool of blood was a black and white Adidas shoe that the police believe that he was reaching for and that he fell into the mat and suffocated because of. He was basically reaching in for this shoe. The issue with this, the shoe was on top of the pool of blood. Kendrick's body was on top of the shoe. There was blood on the floor, but not on the shoe. So what that implies is that the shoe was placed there after Kendrick's body was placed there. How is it possible that he is upside down and there's blood able to pool all around the shoe and there's blood under the shoe, but there's no blood on the shoe? That is super suspicious to me. That is number 3. Let's talk about number 4. This one kind of gets me worked up a little bit. And there's a lot of talk of cover-ups in this case and police purposely doing things to manipulate the investigation. And I wasn't there, so I can't 100% say, but what I can say is what it looked like. And what it looked like is that there was a level of negligence that was almost too gross to not observe. So when I'm talking about negligence, there's a lot of things that went wrong. But one of the main things and one of the first things is that these police walked into a crime scene 100% not prepared. Like, when you walk into a crime scene, you're supposed to wear coverings. You're supposed to wear those blue kind of bags on your shoes so that you don't have footprints on the scene. Basically, you're supposed to do everything you can to avoid contaminating the scene. These police walked in with the regular shoes. They moved him out of the mat. They moved him after they moved him out of the mat. The integrity of the scene was not maintained, let's say that. And you know this because the photos of Kendrick's body, there's at the edge of the photos, you can see the shoes of the people taking the pictures. You can see the shoes of the investigators. You can see on the camera as they're rolling his body out of the gym that they are not in gear that is appropriate for a crime scene. And it's just like, this gross negligence. It doesn't make sense for so many people to not be like, oh, hey, y'all, maybe we should do crime scene 101 and not mess up this crime scene. Like, maybe we should. Like, I can understand walking into the crime scene and then being like, oh, snap, this might actually be a homicide investigation. They didn't know at this point. They just knew that someone was deceased. Okay, walk in. Thought maybe someone just passed away. Either way, they should have immediately removed themselves, got the appropriate gear, and then proceeded to investigate. So that is a huge deal to me, and it should raise everyone's antennas because it just doesn't make sense. Let's talk about the next thing. Number 5, there were blood droplets found within 50 feet of Kendrick's body. They were on the wall inside of the gym. These droplets were tested. However, they were only tested to see if they were a match to Kendrick. And this test was ruled inconclusive. The issue is that there were no further tests to see if maybe they could match the blood to someone else in the school or maybe retest to see if it was Kendrick's. It was just inconclusive and that was it. And it was never tested again. It was never taken in for evidence. The police claimed that this blood was visibly old. It had looked like it had been there for a while, so they just didn't think it was necessary to keep that in evidence and maybe test again and look into it further. They just said, no. But it was within 50 feet of his body, and anyone in their right mind would be like, well, aren't you supposed to take everything in for evidence? So that's another thing that the police really dropped the ball on. It literally could have led them to whoever did this to Kendrick if the blood did belong to someone who potentially hurt him. Number 6, this one. They all kind of bother me, but this one bothers me a lot. So on top of Kendrick's body, there were a pair of sneakers that presumably were his sneakers. His sister confirmed that they were his sneakers. They were also obviously the sneakers that he was seen on the surveillance footage wearing that day at school. There was a sneaker under him that the police think he was reaching for when he fell into the gym mat. That was the white and black Adidas shoe. In addition to those shoes, there was a sneaker, kind of gray with some orange highlights on it, in the gym that had red dots on it. Not only that, there was a hoodie not far from the mat that Kendrick's body was found in. Both of these items were not bagged and tagged and taken in for evidence. I will say, apparently they tested the shoe and it was found to not be blood on the shoe, but they still didn't take the shoe and the hoodie in for evidence. That could have been something that was revisited years down the line if this case was ever reopened. And it just, like I said, the negligence, it just blows my mind. And there was a retired FBI agent who did an interview about all this, and he said, this is crime scene 101. Like I've said, this is crime scene 101. You bag and you tag everything, because we don't know if this is a homicide. We don't know if this is an accident. So we should take all the proper precautions just in case. And they did not do this. All right, number 7, y'all. This is a big one. The coroner spoke out publicly against the investigation, against the police who were conducting the investigation into Kendrick Johnson's case. He came out and said that against Georgia state law, the police did not notify him of Kendrick Johnson's death immediately like they were supposed to. He was not notified of Kendrick Johnson's death until 6 hours after his body was found. 6 hours. That is a long time. The coroner is supposed to be notified right away, and he wasn't. He also said that the crime scene, or the scene, was just in terrible condition. Kendrick looked like his body had been moved by the police, and everything in general about the scene just wasn't handled professionally. He felt like the whole scene was a mess. One of the biggest areas of concern, and the reason that I saved it for last, is involving the surveillance footage. So there were 4 cameras actually in the gym. All of these cameras are motion activated. So theoretically, they're supposed to turn on and record when they sense motion in the gym. And when motion stops, they might cut off, but then they cut right back on as soon as there is more motion detected. As I told you, in this old gym, it is basically a vessel for students to get from one place to another place in the school. So you would think that these cameras will probably be rolling most of the day, right? Well, we don't know. What we do know is that there were definitely some discrepancies. So the first 2 cameras, there's 2 cameras. The first 2 were running up until 11:05 a.m. the day that Kendrick passed away. And they went completely black until 1:15, the first one came back on, and 1:16 p.m. That is over 2 hours, sorry, completely unaccounted for. 2 other cameras went black from 12:04 p.m. to 1:09 p.m. Over 1 hour, completely unaccounted for. All of this time is so important because this is time where whoever was in that gym before Kendrick would have been seen on the camera. So we actually know that Kendrick went in the gym around 1:09 p.m., around the same time that the cameras actually cut back on. But all of that time before that, when whoever else was walking in that gym or out of that gym, we don't know. So that's very critical. There were also some discrepancies with the camera times and other cameras in the school not matching the time on the cameras in the gym. It seemed like all of this was, I don't want to say tampered with, and I can't say tampered with, but it wasn't running congruently, the camera footage. It was jumping. It wasn't showing everything. Some of it was blurry, and it's hard to say if that maybe the files got corrupted when the IT department was trying to download it to give to the police. It did take a couple days to get all of the footage that the police were asking for. So we don't know if the file got corrupted. We don't know if that portion of the video was purposely dropped out. We don't know. We have no idea what happened to that surveillance footage. But I will say it's extremely suspicious that the only time that day we lost the surveillance footage was around the same time that whoever possibly could have hurt Kendrick would have been seen on the footage walking into the gym. So I told you guys that in the first autopsy, it was found that Kendrick died from positional asphyxia, basically in line with the police's theory that this was all a terrible accident and that he passed away because he suffocated in the gym mat. Now, as you know, the parents were not buying this. Most of the public were not buying this at all, not even a little bit. So the parents were actually they got permission from a judge to exhume Kendrick's body and perform a second autopsy. They hired a private medical examiner to perform a second autopsy on Kendrick's body, and what they found was unspeakable. This medical examiner came to the conclusion that Kendrick's death was not an accident at all, and that he actually died from blunt force trauma to the back of the neck. This is such a drastically different result than positional asphyxia. And medical examiners, it's a science, right? But there is a lot of professional, not bias, but there's a lot of professional, like, how do I word it? It's professional opinion that goes into an autopsy. So in some way that is biased. So it is not unreasonable to imagine that two medical examiners might find two different results. Second examiner found that he actually died from blunt force trauma, which was actually not surprising to the parents. In fact, they kind of felt relief in a way because they had the confirmation of their concerns that he actually didn't die by accident. And not only this gives me chills. I just got chills because I know what I'm about to say. Kendrick's body was found with all of his organs removed and his body filled with newspaper clippings and magazine articles. He was missing every single organ from his body. It was just his skin and his bones left. When I tell you every organ, I mean down to his tongue. Every organ of his body was removed. And when the medical examiner found this and notified the parents, they called up the funeral home like, what is up with this? And the funeral home said to the parents, look, this is how I received his body, actually. I don't know who removed the organs, but apparently it is commonplace for the organs to be removed in some situations as the body goes into the embalming process. So, funeral home claims that they received the body that way, and the parents were upset, obviously because his organs were gone, of course, but also that they just weren't notified of the condition. Why were his organs removed? He wasn't an organ donor. Where were his organs? Where did they go? Why did they take them out? Was it to hide or to tamper with evidence? That is the thought process of the parents. And when there's so many things adding up, there's so many things not making sense, it's understandable. After Kendrick's death, there were some students that came forward saying that he was in some sort of feud with another male student at the school over a girl, that there was somebody that he was not getting along with because they were going at it over a girl. And there was also apparently this anonymous Facebook page that was created, and they posted something along the lines of mess with me and body start dropping. And after they posted that, the Facebook account was deleted. And again, it was completely anonymous, but police never figured out who posted that. And a lot of times kids do stupid stuff, like they want to associate themselves with murder for some strange reason when they're not involved at all, like the Tristan Bailey case. But what if this really was like, what if that really was the person who killed Kendrick? Like, we don't know. And it's just eerie. It's just eerie to think about. Some other speculation by the family was that there were two boys who were brothers that attended the same high school as Kendrick that were harassing him. Now that part wasn't speculation. Apparently Kendrick had gone to his parents and told them that he was being harassed by these two boys. And these two boys actually, coincidentally, have a father who was in the FBI at the time. And Jacqueline just thought it was way too ironic that he had been having issues with these two boys who have a father in the FBI, and now her son's investigation seems like it's all being covered up. And she really believed that it was a cover-up, and she really believed that these two boys were involved. In 2014, the Johnsons filed a lawsuit, a wrongful death lawsuit against Lowndes High School, basically stating that they did nothing to stop the harassment of Kendrick and to help him when he was dealing with bullying at the school. Not only this, in 2015, the Johnsons filed a $100 million civil suit against a handful of people. There were police officers in this suit, 3 different students, an FBI agent, an FBI agent of the 2 students, the school itself, and others as well. And the parents didn't have any hard evidence in this civil suit. So when they were asked what their evidence was and they came forth with no evidence, they had to drop all the charges, and they actually had to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars to the people that they accused without evidence, because all these people had paid for lawyer fees and representation, and basically all over charges that ended up being dropped. So they filed these suits, but at the end they ended up having to pay money back. Kendrick Johnson's case was closed on the federal level in 2016. However, due to Jacqueline's resilience, she was not giving up. She wanted justice for Kendrick. She wanted to know what happened to Kendrick, and she was not settling with the idea that this was a terrible accident. She got permission from the judge to exhume Kendrick's body for a second time to perform a third autopsy. And Jacqueline said that every time she exhumed his body and buried him again, it felt like she lost him again. She said she felt like she lost her son 3 times because she had to go through the funeral processions and burying him 3 different times. I can only imagine the pain that she experienced as a mother, having to bury her son not only once, not twice, but 3 times, all in the name of justice for Kendrick. The Lowndes County Sheriff decided to reopen Kendrick's case, thank goodness, in March of 2021, just a few months ago. And while we still don't have many answers, I'm hoping that in the coming months we will receive some information, some closure, some finalization to what happened to Kendrick. There are too many opposing facts. There are too many things that just don't add up, don't make sense, too much negligence, too many questions. And it's not the way that Kendrick's legacy should remain. He deserves justice. The parents deserve to know what happened to their son, and if someone was responsible for their death, who it was. Now, about 3 months ago, and this is just something that I saw floating around in the news a few months ago when I heard that Kendrick's case was being reopened. Apparently there is a confession that's an audio tape of a male who is believed to be a Caucasian male saying that Kendrick didn't deserve what happened to him and that this person was responsible, whoever was talking. Now, apparently this is a real recording, but the police believe that it was not a real recording. It's basically not being taken seriously as evidence. But one of the family spokespersons did say that they are working to get to the bottom of this recording. The family feels like they want to substantiate everything on their end because they don't feel like the police are on their side. They feel like the police dropped the ball too many times throughout the course of this investigation, and they're not willing to sit around and rely on their word anymore. So the parents are not completely just eliminating this as a possibility of being the person who actually did this to Kendrick. They are taking it seriously, and they are getting a voice analyst involved and getting to the bottom of this recording. We don't have any final conclusion of that just yet, but if we get one, I will be sure to bring it to you. I just remember when this case first made the news, and again, I was young when it came out, but I remember hearing this story and I'm like, how could they even possibly rule this an accident? It doesn't even sound anything close to an accident. In my young mind, I couldn't understand how they could possibly say that this was an accident, but unfortunately, Black men do not get the justice that they deserve. Black men, young Black men, do not get the justice that they deserve. I would not have been surprised if this case was never reopened, and that is sad to say. I remember there were petitions going around. There were people still talking about it on social media years after it had happened. And in all of our minds, we were kind of just like, well, the justice system has failed us yet again. It has failed another young Black man again. And I was so excited because I was so excited when I saw that they were reopening it, because it was just something that I never imagined that they would do. So hopefully there is some justice served for Kendrick. I'm hoping this is not done in vain, that this is a real police effort to do things right this time, to examine all evidence correctly this time, and to really bring justice for Kendrick and to find out what actually happened to him. You know what I'm gonna say? If you made it this far, you are loyal. You really, 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 really are. And I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful morning or afternoon or evening, depending on what time it is when you watch this video. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace.